At 1000 hours local time, the U.S. destroyer Chung-Hoon entered the Taiwan Strait alongside Canadian frigate HMCS Montreal. Routine transit, international waters, the kind of operation American warships have conducted for decades without asking Beijing's permission. But 30 nautical miles to the west, a Chinese destroyer had other ideas. At 10:07, Chung-Hoon's radar operators watched the contact accelerate from 15 knots to 28. New heading, intercept course. The Chinese ship wasn't just shadowing anymore, she was closing with intent. Updated calculations put closest approach under 2,000 yards. Throughout the Chung-Hoon, sailors moved to stations they drilled 1,000 times. The difference today, it wasn't a drill. By 10:12, the Chinese destroyer had closed to 22 nautical miles, just 55 kilometers. At her current speed, she'd reach weapons employment range in under 17 minutes. The tactical action officer pulled up the threat library and reviewed what Beijing was bringing to this fight. Inside those vertical launch cells on the approaching destroyer sat what Chinese state media calls the carrier annihilator, the YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missile. Western analysts consider it China's most dangerous naval weapon, and on paper, it does look scary. At 8.2 meters long and 1,580 kilograms, the YJ-18 attacks in 3 stages. A solid fuel booster kicks it from the launch cell and accelerates to cruise speed. Then a turbojet sustainer takes over, pushing Mach 0.8 while the missile skims 5 to 7 meters above the waves, low enough to disappear into sea clutter on most radar screens. For 180 kilometers, it flies this profile: quiet, patient, using inertial navigation corrected by Chinese Beidou satellites to creep toward the target's predicted location. Then comes its party trick. As it closes on its target, the cruise stage drops away and a second solid rocket motor ignites. In 4 seconds, the missile accelerates from Mach 0.8 to Mach 3. Terminal altitude drops to 3 meters, close enough to touch whitecaps, and the supersonic warhead sprints the final distance in under 50 seconds. At that speed, the 300-kilogram warhead delivers roughly 150 megajoules of impact force. That's equivalent to a car hitting a wall at 600 miles per hour, then exploding. The Chinese destroyer carried 64 vertical launch cells. Standard loadout included somewhere between 8 and 16 YJ-18s. At current range, every single one could reach the Chung-Hoon in under a minute from launch command to impact. Chinese military doctrine calls this saturation attack. Fire enough missiles simultaneously and some will inevitably penetrate any defense. The math seems simple. If defenders can only engage 4 targets at once and attackers fire 8, 4 get through. But at 10:15, as the Chinese destroyer continued closing, the Chung-Hoon's combat systems operators weren't worried. They were amused because that math has several fatal flaws, and every one of them was about to become Beijing's problem. At 10:18, the Chung-Hoon's electronic warfare team pulled up the threat profile on the YJ-18 seeker head. What they found explained why nobody on the American ship was sweating. The missile's active radar seeker operates in X-band, 8 to 12 gigahertz. This isn't classified information, it's just physics. And physics creates vulnerabilities that no software update can fix. X-band gives the seeker excellent resolution for picking up structures out of sea clutter during the final seconds of attack. Short wavelengths mean sharp targeting. But that frequency selection also forces the missile to broadcast its position continuously the entire way in. Every radar pulse announces exactly where the missile is. Every return signal reveals its approach angle. From the Chung-Hoon's perspective, a YJ-18 in terminal sprint might as well be carrying a neon sign saying, "Shoot me!" Even better, the Slick 32 electronic warfare suite bolted to the Chung-Hoon superstructure has been eating X-band seekers since 1979. Coverage spans 50 to 20 gigahertz, with the YJ-18's operating frequency sitting dead center in that envelope. The newest variants just don't detect incoming emissions. They jam them, spoof them, and generate false targets that pull missiles off course entirely. If the Chinese launched and tried to burn through jamming with increased power, the emission becomes a targeting beacon. The missile would be guiding American interceptors onto itself. The terminal sprint creates another problem Chinese engineers couldn't solve. Accelerating from Mach 0.8 to Mach 3 requires burning approximately 200 kilograms of solid propellant in 4 seconds. Subtle, it is not. That thermal signature registers on infrared sensors from dozens of kilometers away. The moment that second stage booster ignites, every IR sensor on the defending ship knows precisely where to look. The missile announces its sprint with a flare visible across the entire horizon. Stage separation makes tracking even easier. When the subsonic cruise body drops away and the supersonic warhead ignites, there's a signature spike. Cross-section changes, velocity changes, altitude shifts. For approximately 1.5 seconds, the weapon flies in aerodynamic transition, unstable between flight profiles. That window makes tracking solutions easier to calculate, not harder. Then there's the evasive maneuvering problem. Chinese sources claim 10G terminal maneuvers, but those movements are pre-programmed. The missile follows a weave pattern coded into guidance software before launch, executing jinx designed by engineers who have never seen actual combat data. It doesn't react to defensive fire. It doesn't sense incoming receptors. It runs a script. The YJ-18 was designed to hit ships that don't shoot back. Chinese test profiles involved cooperative targets, radar reflectors on barges, retired hulls dead in the water, vessels running no electric warfare and carrying no defensive weapons. Those conditions produce impressive statistics. The Club missile family, the Russian system Beijing copied to build the YJ-18, has never successfully engaged a target defended by Aegis, not once in 30 years of service across multiple navies. At 10:23, the Chinese destroyer closed to 18 nautical miles. Her captain probably thought he was carrying trump cards. The Chung-Hoon's crew knew he was carrying expensive noisemakers. At 10:27, the Chung-Hoon's primary radar, the system that made Beijing's missiles irrelevant, was painting the approaching destroyer with mechanical indifference. The spy radar array you see here defines American naval dominance. 4 octagonal faces, each over 11 feet across, mounted to provide 360-degree coverage from wave tops to directly overhead. Each face contains 4,350 individual radiating elements. None of them move. This distinction matters. Traditional radars rotate mechanically, scanning the sky once per revolution. SPY steers its beam electronically by adjusting phase relationships between thousands of individual transmitters. Repositioning anywhere in the hemisphere takes microseconds. No moving parts, no scanning delay. A target that appears on one bearing can be interrogated on a completely different bearing before a mechanical radar completes a single rotation. At 10:31, SPY was tracking the Chinese destroyer, 23 commercial freighters, and 14 aircraft across a 200-mile radius. Simultaneously, the system operates in S-band, 3.1 to 3.5 gigahertz, balancing detection range against resolution. Long enough wavelengths to propagate efficiently over water while minimizing sea clutter. Short enough to track small, fast-moving objects with fire control precision. Peak power output exceeds 6 megawatts, concentrated into beams capable of reaching past 200 nautical miles against high-altitude targets. Sea skimmers like the YJ-18 present a harder problem. Radar horizon limits detection to roughly 35 kilometers regardless of power output. Earth's curvature applies to everyone. But the Aegis wasn't designed to wait for the horizon. The Chung-Hoon was plunged into cooperative engagement capability, a network linking every sensor in the battle space. An E-2D Hawkeye orbiting at 25,000 feet could detect sea skimmers beyond 200 nautical miles and data link that tracked directly into the destroyer's fire control system. The Chung-Hoon didn't need to see incoming missiles herself. Interceptors could launch based on targeting data from any network platform. At 10:34, the weapons control system ran continuous calculations on the Chinese destroyer. Position, velocity, heading, predicted weapons release point, optimal intercept geometry. 4 UYK-43 processors handled over 100 simultaneous tracks while computing engagement solutions for the highest priority threats. The Chinese destroyer scored maximum threat value on nearly every parameter. Closing fast, potential missile carrier, fire control radar active. 96 cells in the Chung-Hoon's Mk-41 vertical launch system held the American response. SM-2s for medium-range engagements, proven workhorses that have been swatting missiles since the Cold War. SM-6s for extended reach, capable of engaging targets beyond the ship's own radar horizon using networked sensor data. ESSMs pack 4 to a cell for close-in rapid reaction. Each weapon type could reach the Chinese ship before her YJ-18s completed their first stage boost. The fire control solution updated 15 times per second. If the Chinese captain so much as opened his launch cell doors, the Chung-Hoon would know before the hydraulics finished cycling. If he illuminated the American ship with targeting radar, spy would detect it, classify it, and generate a firing solution before the Chinese operator finished pressing the button. At 10:37, the Chinese destroyer closed to 14 nautical miles or 26 kilometers. Beijing's ship had entered the range where her missiles could theoretically reach the Chung-Hoon in under 45 seconds. She had also entered the range where SM-6 could turn her into an artificial reef in under 30. The Chinese captain was betting his ship that the Americans wouldn't shoot first. He was right about that. He was wrong about everything else. The confidence aboard the Chung-Hoon wasn't arrogance, it was data. Since October 2023, Arleigh-Burke-class destroyers, same class as the Chung-Hoon, same Aegis combat system, same weapons loadout, had been conducting high-intensity combat operations in the Red Sea. Iranian-backed Houthi militants launched everything they had at commercial shipping and American warships: anti-ship missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, and drone swarms in combinations designed to overwhelm defensive systems. Aegis ate them all. Over 18 months, American destroyers executed hundreds of successful intercepts against every target type. SM-6s reached out and swatted ballistic missiles in their terminal dive, targets moving faster than the YJ-18 sprint phase. SM-2s handled cruise missiles at medium range with hit probabilities that made Chinese test data look like fantasy. ESSMs took rapid reaction shots against pop-up threats that appeared with seconds of warning. Phalanx mopped up leakers that penetrated the outer layers. The entire defensive concept functioned exactly as designed, each system covering gaps in the others. Within 48 hours of each Red Sea engagement, terabytes of combat data reached shore facilities and defense contractors. Radar tracks, engagement timelines, interceptor performance metrics, seeker behavior under jamming, every detail analyzed. Misses dissected down to the millisecond. Lessons incorporated into the next software patch and distributed fleet-wide within weeks. Aegis got smarter after every single flight. And although these flights would come after this encounter, decades of data from the first Gulf War onwards had already proven the concept. The Chinese had no equivalent feedback loop then or now. Their missiles had never faced jamming from a real Slick 32. Their seekers had never tried to track a target executing combat maneuvers. Their fire control had never operated against an Aegis ship shooting back. The YJ-18's 96% hit probability came from test ranges where targets didn't maneuver, didn't jam, and didn't return fire. It was like claiming you're a boxing champion because you knocked out a mannequin. Chinese state media could trumpet those numbers all day long. American electronic warfare officers called them job security. At 10:41, the Chinese destroyer closed to 12 nautical miles, close enough that the Chung-Hoon's lookouts could see her superstructure with binoculars. The HMCS Montreal's crew had cameras rolling, documenting the approach for what would become one of the most watched naval encounters of the decade. Beijing's destroyer captain was bringing test range statistics to a combat-proven fight, and he was running out of room to pretend otherwise. At 10:52, the Chinese destroyer crossed inside 10 nautical miles. Through bridge windows, the Chung-Hoon's crew could see her bow wave with naked eyes, a gray shape on the horizon growing larger by the minute. The Canadian frigate Montreal held position astern, her own crew documenting everything on camera. Both destroyers mounted naval guns on their bows. At this range, the mathematics of missile combat started to collapse. Flight times measured in seconds rather than minutes. Reaction windows that favored the shooter. If this went kinetic, it would come down to something navies hadn't practiced seriously since World War II: surface gunnery. The Chung-Hoon carried the Mark 45 Mod 4, a 5-inch gun that American ships have relied on since Vietnam. The Chinese destroyer mounted an HPJ-38, a 130mm weapon reverse-engineered from the Soviet AK-130. On paper, the Chinese gun looks superior, heavier 33-kilogram shells versus the American 32-kilogram rounds, rate of fire reaching 40 rounds per minute through a vertical autoloader, a longer 9.1-meter barrel-pushing shells at 850 meters per second, engagement range extending to 30 kilometers against surface targets. The Chinese military forums love comparing these specifications. The numbers seem to prove planned superiority in surface gunnery: bigger, faster, longer ranged. What the forums never mentioned was fire control. The HPJ-38 uses the ZPJ-1 director, a combined radar and electro-optical tracker mounted separately from the gun. Radar acquires the target, optics refine the track, fire control computer calculates a ballistic solution accounting for target motion, wind, and barrel wear. The gun fires, then the system waits to see what happens. If the rounds miss, and naval gunnery against maneuvering targets produces plenty of misses, the crew observes the splashes, adjusts manually, and tries again. This is essentially World War II methodology with better sensors. The Mark 45 works in a completely different universe. Mounted directly above the barrel sits the Mark 5 velocimeter, a Doppler radar that measures actual muzzle velocity of each round as it leaves the bore, not theoretical velocity calculated from propellant tables, the actual velocity of that specific shell, affected by barrel wear, propellant temperature, humidity, a dozen other variables that change shot to shot. That measurement feeds back into the MK-160 gun computer system immediately. The computer compares predicted trajectory against measured initial conditions and adjusts the next shot before it fires. After several rounds, the system has calibrated itself against real-world performance. Miss left, the computer knows. Miss short, the computer knows. Accuracy improves with every trigger pull. The integration goes deeper. Spy radar can track outgoing 5-inch projectiles, watching where shells actually fly versus where ballistic tables predicted. The data feeds directly into the fire control loop. By the 10th round, the system has characterized actual ballistic performance under current conditions and walks subsequent shots onto target automatically. The HPJ-38 fires faster and throws heavier shells. It has no idea where any of them went after leaving the barrel. The Mark 45 fires slower but learns from every shot. In the time it takes the Chinese gun to empty a magazine and hope something hit, the American gun has found the target and put rounds on it consistently. At 10:58, the Chinese destroyer closed to 8 nautical miles, 15 kilometers, well within gun range for both ships. The Chinese captain faced an ugly calculus. His YJ-18s were compromised before leaving the tube. His radar couldn't burn through the Aegis jamming. His fire control couldn't match American precision. If he turned back now, Beijing would be furious. But there was one option left. One tactic that negated every American technological advantage. Get close enough that technology stopped mattering. At 11:12, the Chinese destroyer crossed inside 5 nautical miles, 9 kilometers, close enough to see individual crew members on deck through binoculars. At this range, both ships' close-in weapon systems became relevant. The last-ditch defenses designed to shred incoming missiles in the final seconds before impact. The Chinese destroyer mounted Type 1130, China's most advanced Sea Whiz. 11 barrels of 30mm rotary cannon delivering 10,000 rounds per minute. 2 ammunition drums holding 1,280 rounds of tungsten core penetrators. Enough metal to theoretically saturate a cone of airspace and disintegrate anything that entered it. The Chung-Hoon mounted a Phalanx Block 1B, 6 barrels of 20mm Gatling cannon, 4,500 rounds per minute. Less than half the Chinese rate of fire, slower caliber, lower volume. By every visible metric, the Chinese system dominated. What you couldn't see from the outside made those metrics irrelevant. The Phalanx uses closed-loop spotting. 2 radar antennas work together, one tracking the incoming threat, one tracking the outgoing stream of 20mm rounds. The system watches its own bullets fly downrange and compares their actual trajectory against the predicted intercept point. Drifting left, the mount corrects right. Falling short, elevation adjusts. This correction happens continuously. During the burst itself, Phalanx literally steers its fire based on where rounds actually go, not where ballistic tables say they should. Type 1130 tracks the target. It doesn't track its own rounds. This is the difference between hoping and knowing. At engagement distances under 2,000 meters against targets moving faster than Mach 2, angular errors measured in fractions of a degree produce complete misses. A sea-skimming missile crosses the final kilometer in approximately 1.5 seconds. In that window, the Type 1130 fires 250 rounds along a predicted trajectory. If that prediction is wrong by half a degree, and predictions are always wrong by something, every single round misses behind the target. Phalanx fires 112 rounds in the same window, but after the first 10-round burst, 0.13 seconds of flight time, the system knows exactly where those rounds went. The second burst adjusts. The third burst walks onto target. Engagement data shows first hits typically occurring by the third or fourth burst, well inside 1 second of trigger pull. This system doesn't predict and pray, it observes and corrects. Caliber debates miss the point entirely. A 20mm tungsten penetrator at 1,100 meters per second delivers sufficient energy to shred missile airframes, rupture fuel tanks, and detonate warheads. The 30mm rounds from the Type 1130 are certainly more destructive, if they're correct. Bigger bullets don't help when they're punching empty air. The Type 1130 has engaged cooperative drone targets flying predictable profiles with no jamming, no evasion, and no return fire. Test conditions that generate impressive statistics and teach nothing about actual performance. At 11:19, the Chinese destroyer closed to 3 nautical miles, 5.5 kilometers now. The Chinese captain had run out of technological options. Every system he carried had been designed to fight a navy that couldn't shoot back. Every American system had been designed to fight him and validated in combat to prove it. He had one card left, and he was about to play it. At 11:27, the Chinese destroyer accelerated to 30 knots and turned directly into the Chung-Hoon's path. International rules of the road are explicit. Vessels overtaking must do so safely. The Convention on the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, rules that every professional Navy follows, requires minimum passing distances for exactly this reason. 2 warships at high speed in close proximity is a recipe for disaster. But the Chinese captain wasn't following international rules anymore. He was implementing Beijing's only viable tactic against a navy he couldn't defeat: bumper boats. At 11:29, the Chung-Hoon's bridge crew watched the Chinese destroyer's bow swing across their course line, speed still increasing, range collapsing. The HMCS Montreal, holding station astern, had cameras capturing everything, footage that would be on every news network within 24 hours. At 11:31, the Chinese destroyer cut across the Chung-Hoon's bow at 150 yards, less than half a ship length, close enough to see individual sailors on the Chinese deck. Both destroyers displaced approximately 8,000 tons and stretched roughly 510 feet long. At 22 knots combined closure speed, 150 yards takes 12 seconds to cross. One rudder command, one moment of miscalculation, one equipment failure, one inexperienced helmsman, and 16,000 tons of warship would meet in a single catastrophic impact. No weapon system engages that fast. SM-2 requires target acquisition, fire control solution, launch command, booster ignition, and flyout time. Minimum 15 to 20 seconds against a surface target at point-blank range. The 5-inch gun needs bearing and elevation commands, round selection, loading cycle, and barrel traverse. Phalanx was designed for incoming missiles moving at Mach 2, not a ship sitting 150 yards off the beam. At 150 yards, weapons became theater props. Physics decides everything. The hull plating on both destroyers measured 15 to 25 millimeters of high-strength steel, HY-80 grade on the American ship, something similar on the Chinese. This material keeps water out. It provides structural integrity. It is emphatically not armor. A collision at combined closing speeds would deliver kinetic energy measured in hundreds of megajoules. A bulbous bow punching through a destroyer's hull amidships would open compartments to sea faster than any damage control team could respond. A deliberate impact between 2 destroyers at speed wouldn't just damage both ships, it would likely sink them, lost with all hands, or close to it. So why pull within 150 yards? Because at that distance, the entire calculus of naval combat inverted. Every advantage the Chung-Hoon possessed became meaningless. At 30 nautical miles, every American system applied. Aegis tracked incoming missiles while the Slick 32 jammed their seekers. SM-2 and SM-6 executed intercepts validated in actual combat against actual threats. The 5-inch gun fired with real-time ballistic correction that Chinese systems couldn't match. Phalanx provided terminal defense using closed-loop tracking that made the Type 1130 look like a museum piece. At 150 yards, none of that mattered. What mattered was hull strength, collision geometry, and which navy could build replacement ships faster. China launches 8 to 10 major surface combatants per year. Shipyards at Da Nang, Yangnan and Hudong operate at surge capacity, pumping out destroyers and frigates like automobiles. Plan grew from 216 Battle Force ships in 2005 to over 370 in 2024 and kept growing. The United States launches 2 to 3 major combatants per year. Bath Iron Works and Huntington Ingalls run at capacity limits constrained by workforce shortages, supply chain problems, and budget authorization delays that stretch for years. A collision that destroyed both ships favored Chinese strategic math. A collision that merely sidelined both vessels for 2 years of repairs still favored Chinese strategic math. They had more hulls. They could afford the exchange rate. The Chung-Hoon's captain recognized the logic. The destroyer slowed to 10 knots, reducing collision energy by 75% while maintaining steerage. The ship held course through its Taiwan Strait, asserting the transit rights the entire operation was meant to demonstrate. When the Chinese destroyer held position at 150 yards for 6 agonizing minutes, the Chung-Hoon's crew maintained stations and waited. Professional discipline held. At 11:38, the Chinese destroyer finally broke contact. She increased distance and fell astern, her captain having successfully demonstrated China's most sophisticated naval tactic, aggressive driving. The Chung-Hoon completed the transit alongside the HMCS Montreal, whose crew had captured every moment of the interaction on camera. That footage circled the globe within hours. Millions of views showing the world exactly how China would try to win against the US by playing bumper boats. Bye for now.